Hi, my name is Jackie Bailey. I'm going to demonstrate how to give emergency first aid care to a victim in need. The purpose of this demonstration is to teach my audience common first aid conditions and how to respond to them. When I was in LPN school, I was always taught that you never really know a skill or a technique until you can teach it to someone else. So let's see if I can teach it to you. Now, accidents happen. They happen to all of us. Someone chokes, someone falls from a high elevation, someone gets bitten by whether it's an animal or a human, people get stung by bees. These are things that we cannot control. So instead of just waiting around for emergency service personnel to arrive, you may need to step in to save someone's life. Any one of us could be affected by the unthinkable. Learning basic first aid can give the victim valuable minutes until the emergency services do arrive. According to the CDC, unintentional injuries are one of the leading causes of death in the U.S. Unintentional injuries kill more people ranging from ages 1 to 44 than heart disease and even cancer. It is also the leading cause of death in children and adolescents, and like I said, it can happen to anyone. Even my own family has been affected by an unintentional injury that ended up fatal. My cousin Chet died at the age of 21 on his 21st birthday. He dove into a shallow pool and broke his neck and passed away in 2008. There's also state laws that protect you for any liability when providing CPR or first aid to a victim in need. It's important to remember that not every person wants your help, so it's imperative that you get their permission or consent if possible. If you are unable to get the person's permission or consent, go ahead and continue, and the state laws will kick in to protect you. In Colorado, there's a state law called the Good Samaritan Act for emergency care. The law is 13-21-108, and it states that any person in good faith who provides emergency care to a person in need without compensation is exempt from civil liability, unless the acts of care are grossly negligent, wanton, or willful, which basically means that if you were intentionally hurting the person, then you could be held liable. If you were trying to help, then you won't be. So now I'm going to show you how to respond to an emergency situation. And because there's so many conditions ranging from burns to tick bites, for the purposes of time, I'm only going to demonstrate care for a puncture wound. Pooh here has gracefully volunteered to be my patient today, and as you can see, he has a big gaping puncture wound in his side. So what is a puncture wound? A puncture wound is something that occurs when, let's say you step on a nail, or you get stabbed, or you're impaled by an object. And we'll say Pooh here fell out of a tree from getting his honey and got hit by a branch, and it went through his side. So the first thing to do is to gather all your supplies. So what you're going to need is some sterile gauze. If sterile gauze is not available to you, you can use a clean cloth, or I have some sterile cotton balls here on hand. You're also going to need clean water and soap. If clean water and soap isn't available to you, first aid kits come with these antiseptic towelettes. You're also going to need some tweezers. Just regular household tweezers will do. You're also going to need some alcohol. I have alcohol prep swabs here. You're also going to need some antibiotic cream or ointment, and I have some of that here. You're also going to need some bandages. Bandages range in various sizes. I have some large ones here, and I also have several smaller ones. I also have some waterproof tape and this is what they call silk tape. I also have some medical bandage scissors if I need them. So once you have all of your supplies obtained, you can begin. So the first step is to stop the bleeding. Now we can all see that Pooh here is bleeding, so I'm going to take my cotton balls and I'm going to apply direct pressure to his wound to stop the bleeding. Now I'm going to do this as long as necessary. If it continues to bleed for a long period of time, you're going to want to get medical attention immediately. So this may take several minutes. So once the bleeding is stopped, you can start cleaning the wound. And I have that antiseptic towelette or the soap and water. And you're just going to clean the wound out as best you can. The next step is to remove any debris or particles that may be in the wound. Now if something like Pooh here fell out of a tree and landed on a branch, now if that branch was still stuck in him, you're going to leave that there. You're not going to touch it. You're going to get an ambulance there right away. But if there is no branch and just small pieces of dirt, you're going to take your tweezers and you're going to take your alcohol and you're going to clean your tweezers and sterilize them as best as possible, and you're going to get as much of the debris out as possible. Now remember, any large particles or any large debris, don't touch it. If it's deeply embedded, don't touch it. Okay, the next step is to apply your antibiotic ointment. So we'll put that on the wound, and then you're going to want to cover the wound. Now I have the large bandage here, and I'm just going to, as cleanly as possible, place this over Pooh's wound here. Now if you need to, you can reinforce the wound with the tape. And next you're going to want to change the bandage regularly. You'll want to change it at least once a day or as needed. So if this bandage started getting saturated with blood, I would change it and put a clean one on and follow the same steps. Otherwise, once a day. You're also going to want to monitor for signs and symptoms of infection. Those include redness, swelling, warm to the touch, odor, drainage, things like that. Now, if Pooh here was to develop a fever, I'm going to want to seek medical attention immediately because that is a sign of sepsis, which is a blood infection that can be fatal. So watch for fever as well, really high fevers, and then get that person to the hospital right away. You're also going to seek medical attention right away if the wound is deep, if it's in either feet, or if it's contaminated with saliva or soil, or if it's a result of a bite from a human or an animal. Now, if it was a result from an animal, you may have been exposed to rabies and you may need rabies vaccinations. Also, if you have not had a tetanus within the last 10 years, you're going to want to get one of those as well. So, important things to remember, puncture wounds usually don't bleed a whole lot. They almost always seem to close up immediately. Don't let that stop you from preventing it from bleeding and cleaning it and dressing it as soon as possible to prevent infection. As soon as you cover the wound, this wound is protected from any dirt or anything else getting in there and causing an infection. If it's deep enough to draw blood, or if the bleeding persists, you'll want to seek medical attention. So now that I've shown you how to care for a puncture wound, let's review what we've gone over. I've shown you how to respond to a puncture wound using basic first aid techniques. I've given you info on the laws that protect you from any liability when you do provide first aid. I've shown you some of the materials that can be used when providing first aid. There's so many materials out there. Don't limit yourself to this. And I've shown you how to correctly care for a puncture wound using the materials that we've gathered. And I've given you keys to remember when providing first aid care for a puncture wound. So it would be ideal if all injuries could be prevented, but in spite of our best efforts, injuries will continue to occur, and accidents happen. And a lot of these accidents do result in death. So acting quickly and knowing the steps in giving effective first aid can reduce consequences of many injuries. And just remember, first aid is complicated, and it's situation specific. You're never going to know what you have to do until you see what you're dealing with. So most of the time, you'll have to just act on instinct. So the better prepared you are, the better care you will give, and the more knowledge you have, will leave you ready to respond when needed, when dealt with the unexpected. Just always remember, if you find yourself in a situation beyond your ability, don't be afraid to call for help. Also remember to stay calm and do not hesitate. And if you panic, the victim will panic. If you hesitate, you'll scare them. You never know when you might need to step in and provide first aid to a victim in need, and you never know, that person may be you. Thanks for being here. I hope that you've learned something from my demonstration, and we'll see you next time.